Hello everyone and welcome to your last deadline stream before the World Cup. Game week 16, it's been building up to this all week, Ben. And it's not been an easy week at all. We've got the EFL Cup, we've had that to kind of disrupt things, to add more injuries to the mix and some confusion. We've already got a couple of questions already, Ben. People are desperate to know what is happening. But first and foremost, I always ask, because it is always a busy time for you, but how are you doing today?
JJ, you're right, but when is it ever an easy week when it comes to the Premier League and midweek fixtures? So yes, it has been a little bit of a push at times, but look, we'll get through it as we always do. Anyway, before I kick things off, very happy belated birthday to you, my man. I know you like to celebrate with several delicacies across the course of a day. So yeah, mate, I hope you had a great one and I hope you haven't put too much weight on.
Well,
Still looking fine.
I wasn't going to the World Cup this year, so I thought I can let loose a little bit before the Premier League weekend, and then you'll guide me back on the course to fitness. But yes, so we've already got some questions coming in. So just a reminder for everybody, we are gonna kind of keep going with the alphabetical order. There's some questions here about Wilson, Haaland. We will get to them, and then at the end, if you do have questions, let us know. But also, if we don't have time to answer your questions on screen, you can see the Premier Injuries website, and you can go there anytime. Latest injury updates, as you can see, I'm clicking it here, and then you've got every team in the Premier League, all their injury information, because Ben and I keep it up to date. Ben tweets it out, It's the essential injury information there. But this is what you're here for, the predicted lineups. So we're going to start off, as I said, alphabetically, Bournemouth. Any injury information people need to be aware of, Ben?
One or two issues, but before I kick off, I just want to put the caveat out there for people who maybe forgot or any first-time watchers of the stream. Now, we're literally coming off the back of around about 7 or 8 press conferences. This is a working document, so the lineups that you actually see in front of you aren't necessarily the ones which are locked in. Case in point, last weekend, if you watched the stream, you would have had Haaland there as that starting striker for City, but if you checked out the article closer to the FPL deadline, you would see that Alvarez was in there. So like I say, as more information becomes available, these will be tweaked and tailored around that news. So like I say, it is a complete working document all the way up until that FPL deadline. So without further ado, I'll kick off with Bournemouth. Now, Gary O'Neill has a bit of a selection headache, let's just say. I think the Cherries are on the back of 4 straight Premier League defeats. He made maybe 9 changes against Everton midweek, and they came away with a 4-1 win. So I know there's a few players on the fringes of that first team squad who've certainly thrown the hat in the ring. But in terms of injuries, everybody come through that game relatively unscathed. There's a few bumps and bruises. I think Jordan Zamora was the biggest take home from that. He was on the receiving end of a pretty nasty tackle from Anthony Gordon, but he's had a bit of treatment. He's okay. Some of those long-term absentees, I'm thinking about Lloyd Kelly. He's potentially, they were hoping that he would maybe return to the squad, but it looks highly unlikely. So it'll just be a case of how Gary O'Neill wants to tweak things, like I say, maybe using 1 or 2 of those players from that Carabao Cup win and integrate them with those players within the Premier League squad.
Do you think as well there'll be a bit more rotation in this game week with the World Cup in mind? This is what a lot of people are asking. This is something I think that you've debunked quite often, but people do ask it to us every week.
So in terms of managers potentially looking after their players in terms of load and reducing their injury instances by, using them rotation, I'm presuming the sort of angle that you're pushing. And absolutely, I categorically state, and I have done several times before, what happens on the international stage is of absolutely no consequence to what happens domestically. Their priorities lie with their clubs. They're judged on results, so it's their clubs alone. They'll get through this game in whichever way they see fit in terms of picking their strongest and best starting 11 for this upcoming fixture, and then allow the players to go away and do their stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, so we've got a few messages here. John Dre has wished me a happy birthday. We've got Slav Cho. He's asked us a question. Ben, he says, been meaning to ask you for a long time. Please share some personal info with us. Where you from? Age, day, job, sport, experience. He's not asked credit card number and things like that though, so I don't know if that's for another show, another time. But I guess, yeah, Ben, where are you from?
Oh, it's like an episode of Blind Date. Well,
Yeah,
born and bred Newcastle.
yeah.
I'm 45 years of age, and what's my job? Well, I don't really know what my job is. I've sort of strapped the moniker of an injury data analyst to my as a working title of sorts. Basically, 7 days a week, all day, every day, 365 days a year. I'm working in and around injuries, collecting data, collating that information, putting packages together, working with the media, working with sports outlets, sports litigation firms, insurance companies, mobile tech industry. So look, yes, the core of the work is in and around obviously injuries, but there's a lot more to the role than that. And I'm self-employed, it's my own business, and that's what I've been doing now for around about what we at, maybe 13, 14 years, officially full-time since the World Cup in South Africa 2010.
Wow. Big milestone, isn't it? So, like, this World Cup is almost another milestone in terms of that. Just quickly on me, I'm from London. I don't know if people can tell that, or if they think that I'm from posh land or something. Age, I've just turned 28. It was my birthday yesterday. Day job, working with Ben, but also I'm studying a PhD in politics. So if people have any political questions, they can ask me about that. And sport experience, I've never really played at elite level, but I love talking about it, which I think most people do. Anyway, we're going to move on to the next team, which is the mighty Gunners Arsenal. If they win this weekend, we go into the World Cup as Premier League leaders. Is there positive news in terms of the injury front, Ben?
Yeah, we haven't heard from Mikel Arteta yet. That's due fairly late on a Friday afternoon, around about 3:30. We're not expecting any major updates from Mikel Arteta. The main talking point has been maybe around that left back spot, and maybe the likes of Zinchenko or Kieran Tierney vying for that role. It was a little bit surprised to see Zinchenko thrown straight back in there after his recent calf problems. He wasn't involved midweek in the defeat to Brighton. So, like I say, we expect that Gunners lineup to be relatively unchanged.
And Sam has actually brought up a discussion point that we've had many times in terms of the end of the season as well. He believes that there'll be many non-tries this weekend. Many players will just go through the motions and save themselves for the World Cup. Now, I think this is a different point in terms of the rotation risk. As you said, managers will be fully focused on their job, which is the Premier League. But do you think this is a possibility with players? Psychologically, they might turn off, they might think, we call it, you say they've already got their flip-flops on, 1 foot on the sand. Some of them will be looking forward to a well-earned rest. Is that a possibility for maybe some anomalous results as well?
Possibly it's difficult, or it's hard to ignore, some high profile injuries that have kept players out of this World Cup. You're thinking about the likes of the Reece James of this world and their Golo Kantes. Their teammates will be looking at that and thinking, now that I'm in the squad and now that it's confirmed I'm going to Qatar, maybe I want to hold back a little bit. But the old adage is, if you're in doubt, if you're starting to make decisions which don't come naturally, then you could end up getting more hurt. And I was asked about the impact that maybe could have on Newcastle this weekend, and I use Kieran Trippier as a great example. Now, we've seen Trippier in the first half down at St. Mary's, and if anybody was in any doubt with regards to where Kieran Trippier's priorities or main focus lies at this point in time, that first half, he goes down and receives treatment on that hamstring problem. Now, look, you could hold your hands up and you could be replaced, given the fact that we know they have high recurrence, high re-injury rates, and the likelihood is if you suffer a strain, that's going to end your tournament. But no, he went in during the break, had some more treatment, stretched that off, and continued down at St. Mary's. And indeed, Eddie Howe, was it said, it was me that actually made that decision to bring him off, not his. And then he also featured against Crystal Palace in the Carabao Cup on Wednesday night. So, like I say, there's players fully focused on still doing a job for their domestic teams. And, their focus won't shift onto the World Cup until after that final whistle has been blown.
Yusinho has also asked, do any nations ask clubs not to play their players?
Requests can be made. But ultimately, that's not enforceable in any way, shape, or form. And like I say, I go back to managers and coaches on selecting their squads for this weekend. Their priority is their own team and getting those results. If they don't get the results, like I say, this is a results-driven business, and this could affect potentially their job. So there are one or two nations who have placed requests. But certainly, and I think even Argentina was one of those who put a request in for Christian Romero to join up with them early, even though he's been carrying an injury. And, up until that point, I think this was last week, Tottenham had still refused to release him early for that, like I say, even though he was injured.
Wow, fascinating to kind of know the insights behind the scenes. And this is the thing as well, like people make a lot of guesswork assumptions and things, and this is why it's great to talk to you about it, Ben. But let's move it to Aston Villa, already playing quite well under Unai Emery. I'm really excited to see what happens with them. I was one of those Arsenal fans that I felt Emery had a bit more to give. Obviously, the results and everything kind of collapsed towards the end, but there was intrigue with him, with his ability to win European Cups with, small teams. I think there's a quality to him, and I think this will suit Aston Villa. So what is your thinking behind the predicted 11 for game week 16?
Yeah, forget about the midweek Carabao Cup defeat to Manchester United, where they made 7 changes. I'm reverting back to the 11 that beat Manchester United in the league comprehensively 3-1. I don't really see any need to make any major changes with that. Unai Emery's had more time on the training pitches to work with this group, trying to implement his own philosophies. And for that reason, like I see Villa unchanged from the league game last Sunday.
Yeah, and I think that they will cause problems, in the league. It's this kind of... I don't want to call Villa a small club, but what I mean is the Emery tactic is small club, pragmatic, play not to lose, and play to the weaknesses of the other team. He's a genius at that, and I think we're going to see some really good results there, especially because Villa do have a fairly decent squad. They got some good players in there. Dinnery, Cash, Martinez, all these kind of defensive-minded players as well might become assets after the World Cup because Emery is a stickler for defensive performances. Now, Brentford, interesting, Ben. Tony's still in the lineup. He is currently under investigation for certain things. What is the information there? Is he just allowed to continue on?
Yeah, he obviously suspended in game week 15, but returned in the Carabao Cup. The official statement from the club was, we're not going to make a statement. And the player himself has come out and he said, I've been working with the Football Association with regards to helping them with their inquiries. And in due course, I will release, more information with regards to that. So, as far as we're concerned, it's innocent until proven guilty. And for that reason, I've got Ivan Toney leading that front line for the Bees. The other main sort of talking point we can have in and around that squad could be around Vitaly Janelt. He had a slight muscular problem that kept him out midweek. As long as he comes through that final session, he should be fine, and I do expect him to start. But we also seen the return of Christian Norgard after just over 2 months out with an Achilles issue. So he's knocking on the door. The reason I don't have him in, he just lacks that little bit of match sharpness and fitness. But like I say, I would expect minutes from the bench.
And Tony scored as well on his return. He wasn't there in game week 15. He is looking good there. And as we said, just to remind people, he's assisting the Football Association with inquiries. So, yeah, it's an interesting situation. I think it's sad that he's missed out on the World Cup squad, but Callum Wilson's in, and we'll get to him a little bit later. But moving on to the Seagulls, Brighton, they've kind of played quite well. Trossard has looked good. Is there going to be another change to the team, though? Because I think this is one of the things that De Zerbi has kind of seen is changing tactics. He's kind of continued that Potter ism of quite a few changes.
Yeah, I mean, the Seagulls were unchanged last time out, and I've went down that route again, despite a great result at the Emirates and the Carabao Cup. But let's contextualise that. We don't want to read too much into it. Sides are heavily rotated and changed, and like I say, emphasis isn't always on pushing as hard as you possibly can in those domestic cup competitions. But we did see the return of Joel Veltman. That's been a calf problem that's kept him sidelined. So, naturally, you could say that Pascal Gross position at right back is maybe under threat, and that would maybe change things potentially higher up the pitch. And we also seen a goal for Danny Welbeck. He's been in great form this season. And if De Zerbi wants to start him, then you suspect Trossard would be moved or deployed or utilised elsewhere within that team. But, I just think that starting 11 deserves to continue, as it were. That Maitoma has been, a revelation in his couple of games, and Ivar at left back, he's been tremendous. So I don't see too many changes for the Seagulls.
Good old Ivar. We've we've been asked about Gross. Giandro said never mind, but he wants to know why is he at right back on the kind of setup there.
Yeah, I mean, that's where he has been deployed. If you look at his heat maps in the absence of Joel Veltman, so he's able, you see with Pascal Gross, he can be deployed and he's comfortable in several different areas. So when you're defending, he's been working in a 4-2-3-1. Attacking, he might play a little bit higher up the pitch. But like I say, it comes down to De Zerbi and whether he wants to throw Joel Veltman back in. That could potentially put Gross maybe in the place of Sonny March or even Ladim Lallana. I think March came off early midweek in the Cup. Not aware of any issues. In fact, there are no issues that have been officially reported. It's only that Moda is the only player sidelined until early 2023 with that long-term ACL injury.
And Trossard still up front. He's looked so good this season. Really some outstanding performances. Is he going to keep that? No Welbeck, no Undav going to threaten that position?
Welbeck would be the one. Of course, he scored against his former employers in the Cup. So again, it'll just come down to whether De Zerbi wants to change things up and how much those exertions, of the midweek game have taken out on their players. So there may be one or two issues with regards to fatigue. But like I say, the team was heavily rotated. So that's why I'm sticking with the same 11 as last weekend.
Now, this one will be of particular interest to you because they're the opponents to your boys, Newcastle. Chelsea, again, because of the Potter kind of mindset, the pragmatism, his ability to adapt to games, but it hasn't kind of brought good results so far. The team have not played well defensively, offensively, all that kind of underlying data. The team haven't been very good. And so do you think there's going to be a lot of changes in the team once again?
I mean, it's difficult to pin down. I think the problem we have here with Graham Potter, he still doesn't know who his best 11 is. And ultimately, I don't even think he knows what his best setup is. Now, for me, I wouldn't have any Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang anywhere near this starting 11. I think Broja is the long-term solution, or certainly at the club for the moment. And he deserves a good run in the team, but I just don't see that happening. And of course, there's no Conor Gallagher here. He'll be buoyed and brimming with confidence following his call up to the Three Lions squad for Qatar. Loftus-Cheek, he may be a little bit disappointed he's a mission, but he's had a good season this year. I think he started 13, if I'm right, of those Premier League games, or certainly 13 games this season. So there's a lot of movement within this team. This is who I'm going out for at this moment in time. But again, as I said at the top of the show, this is a working document, and this could be one of the lineups that I may look to tweak as more news becomes available.
Yeah, and just keep an eye on that as well, Ben. We'll update these as soon as possible. Fridays are crazy busy. And just a little stat for everybody, since Graham Potter's come in, the team have conceded 1.6 XG per 90, which isn't good enough for a team like Chelsea. You know, as you said there's been a lot of chopping and changing, experimentation as he finds the best 11, but also just a lot of the players haven't played too good, and there's also quite a few injuries in there as well. But we do have a question from Eugenio. Kepa returns?
He will return, just not before the World Cup break. That's a problem with his foot relating to the plantar fascia at the bottom of the foot, very painful, and therefore recommended conservative treatment. So he's off his feet, he's resting, and hopefully targeted return in those festive fixture periods on Boxing Day.
I feel like a footballer then. That's what I was doing yesterday, off my feet, relaxing. I don't know if he ate, a big Chinese. But let's move it to Crystal Palace. We've had so many questions, and one thing that you will answer, you'll flesh out as well. Odsonne Edouard, he's not in your starting 11 for this game week. Is that one that you're going to update later, or do you think that he won't play?
We know that he's been struggling with a hamstring problem. Rejoined the group ahead of game week 15, but wasn't fit enough to be involved, and also missed out at St James's Park midweek in the Carabao Cup. Now, the official line from Patrick Vieira is that Odsonne Edouard will travel with the squad to the City ground, but there are no guarantees with regards to his availability. So, like I say, that hamstring problem's got to be managed very, very carefully. Factor in also that Palace got a great result at West Ham. Wilfried Zaha playing centrally, and that's why I've went with this lineup. Now, in terms of, we talked about influence and factors and discussions around that decision-making process and where players are in terms of their availability. So just to throw something else in the mix there, what not a lot of people will realise or understand, a lot of those players, a lot of clubs, players who aren't going to the World Cup will have the next fortnight off. So they will effectively be given 2 weeks off, and then they will resume a mini pre-season, a 4-week pre-season when they return to their club. Now, if you go into this weekend injured and you're unavailable for game week 16, then there will be a requirement from the club for you to come in and receive treatment. Odsonne Edouard is one of those players who will want to be involved because he doesn't want to return to the club and he wants to get himself on a nice little holiday for a couple of weeks. But also, he doesn't want to be in a position where he is risking a serious setback and exacerbating that hamstring problem that could potentially rule him out for the remainder of the year. So for me, it's very much a touch and go. It's a 50-50 call. And I think if he is past fit, then I would expect him to be on the bench.
That's definitely one for eyes on the beach then, thinking about, I'll have to make a speedy recovery just so that I can get my holiday in. Just on that issue then of the World Cup players taking 2 weeks off, as you said there, is there a risk of deconditioning? Because a lot of people are talking about, I'm going to bring in Mo Salah, I'm going to bring in the likes of players who aren't playing in the World Cup, and they're going to have an explosive return to the Premier League, whilst all these other players that have gone to the World Cup, they're going to be fatigued, injured, it's all going to be negatives. And so some people are prophesying that actually teams that have very little players going to the World Cup are going to come out of the gates hot when the Premier League returns. Do you think there's any truth to that? Is there a likelihood of loss of condition?
Right. The reality of the situation is, long gone are the times where players during the off season or this mid-season break, as it now is, would go off and, go and live the dream for a couple of weeks and go and smash Ibiza. It just doesn't happen at the elite level now. And players are, managing themselves 365 days a year. They will be given a mid-season training program, conditioning work to undertake while they're away from the club, and they can be managed remotely from the club via GPS and all of those sort of tracking metrics. So first and foremost, like I say, they will have maybe 2 weeks, 10, 14 days away from the club, but that doesn't mean that they can go off and basically do whatever they want. They will still be monitored, they will still be managed, and there will still be some baseline level fitness work that they'll have to undertake. So in terms of coming back deconditioned, not really. Maybe lacking that little bit of match sharpness from that lack of maybe competitive play, but nothing more than that really.
So would you say that players at the World Cup are more likely to be a lesser condition, fatigued, overplayed?
Now this comes back to the individual. So if you've got a good example, might be somebody like Dominic Calvert-Lewin when he went to the Euros in 2021. Now he was a player who was on the fringes of that 11. I don't even know if he had any minutes during that tournament. When you're in that type of environment, you're never able to train at an intensity. All of the work that you're doing is maintenance. So people like Dominic Calvert-Lewin who returned, yes, they did actually return deconditioned, weren't as fit as where they were because they weren't getting the minutes during the game, and the intensity of the training was such that didn't allow him to build up those fitness levels again. So it depends on how many minutes the players are playing, what position the role that they're deployed, and also how far they actually go in that tournament. In terms of the research, what you will see is those players who go deeper into the tournament and therefore have less of a turnaround when they return to domestic football are at increased risk of picking up injuries, and also tend to take longer to return from those injuries as well. But like I say, it comes down to the individual, it will come down to the club, and also, their profile and no status within that squad. Somebody like Pep Guardiola can afford to maybe carry one or two of these stars and afford maybe not to throw them straight back in there. Whereas others, maybe heavily relying on some of their World Cup stars to really come in and help their side kick on during that second half of the season.
Also, final question. I mean, what's the point of being a footballer if you can't smash Ibiza, like you said earlier? It just makes it redundant, really.
Well, I mean, wait until you're 35 and you can do it every day for the rest of your life, given the money that they're on.
Is that what you do, Ben?
I do that without the footballer's lifestyle prior to that.
Right.
I've got the body of somebody who smashed Ibiza for a lot of years.
Let's turn our attention to Everton then, the Toffees. Neil Maupay leading the line there because of the sad injury to Calvert-Lewin. Is there any other changes in the team though?
We've seen Anthony Gordon drop out for Dwight McNeil in game week 15. I've swapped those two players back over. Again, we've got that conundrum at right back with Nathan Patterson or Seamus Coleman. I've went with Coleman just because Frank Lampard made 11 changes in that Carabao Cup. You're wanting a reaction. You're wanting some of those fringe players to throw their hat in the ring for a start. Of course, they got hammered embarrassingly 4-1. So therefore, it's back to where we were. Idrissa Gana Gayu and Amadou Onana. Hopefully they'll come through their training sessions okay. There were slight doubts. Other than that, it's pretty much as you were.
So up next is Fulham, and big news there with Mitrovic. Is his World Cup under threat as well? He won't be playing game week 16. Is that correct?
According to the outlets in Serbia, have reported that he's actually in his homeland getting treatment. We know that he's been carrying this ongoing foot problem since the last international break. I think it was he injured in the first game playing for Serbia, and then that was exacerbated in a friendly against Norway. He did play against Newcastle. I think it was on the return. That was maybe game week 9 or 10. I don't quite recall, but he was forced off early doors. And since then, it's been a case of just being able to manage that, patch him up. Now, subsequent assessments and evaluation have since revealed, according to reports out in Serbia, that he actually has 2 broken bones in his foot. And while that won't put his World Cup under threat, it will certainly rule him out of the final weekend and potentially Serbia's first group game out in Qatar.
With this broken bone in the foot, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Dominic Calvert-Lewin's injury last season something similar to that, which started this kind of long process of him being in and out, in and out? What was the kind of situation there? Could we see something similar if this isn't handled correctly?
Yeah, Calvert-Lewin was a broken toe, so slightly different, and we don't know the specific details behind this Mitrovic foot problem. What we do know, like I say, he's been patched up and he's been playing, for the last few game weeks and still scoring as well. So, there's a lot going on there in terms of slightly different in how those players are utilised and the styles that they play. At this point, we just have to assume that it's nothing too serious. It probably sounds a lot more, a lot worse than it actually is. And he's going to want to, the problems you're going to have is he's going to really, want to represent his country on the world's biggest stage at this World Cup. He's going to be doing everything that he possibly can to ensure that he's fully fit. And for Fulham supporters, they're just going to have to keep their fingers crossed and hope that he comes through unscathed without, making that issue any worse. And hopefully, like I say, he returns, full of confidence, fully fit, and for the second half of the campaign.
So we've got a question from Yacinio. He says, will you guys cover some of the World Cup injury news?
We will, in short. I will have a World Cup injury table going live at some point next week. That's being worked on by our developers as it currently stands. It will then be a case of me to start collecting and collating those injury updates from outside of the Premier League, which I've sort of started doing. But yes, we will. We normally cover the major international tournaments. We've done the Euros, and we will be planning on doing the World Cup as well.
So let's turn our attention to Leeds United then. Any kind of big injury news from the team there?
Patrick Bamford is out. It was hoped that he would recover from a hip flexor strain, but unfortunately he hasn't. The other question mark is with regards to Harrison, and he could miss out. That's a muscle problem from the Carabao Cup. Jess March made 10 changes midweek. Harrison was the only one to retain his place, but he's picked up a muscle problem, so that calls his availability into question.
And I think one of the things for game week 16 as well is this could be a perfect game for Spurs. They haven't played well recently, but tactically this could fit in well. Leeds are going to press really high. You could question if they have the personnel for some of it. And the manager has kind of said, we're going to double down on it. Jesse Marsh has seen that they've conceded a lot of goals recently and thought, you know what, we're not pressing enough. That's the problem. And I think that could play well into the Tottenham kind of style as well. But let's move it on to Leicester City then. Any kind of big changes that people need to be aware of?
We seem to talk about this every week, but it's the Jamie Vardy and the Padson Daka again conundrum. Jamie Vardy scores in the Carabao Cup midweek. I think he got himself a couple there. Given how he's been managed by Brendan Rodgers in recent times, that's why I've went for Padson Daka. Rarely starts games in quick succession. The other talking points around possibly, Johnny Evans came through that Carabao Cup unscathed, so drop him into the back line. That frees up Daniel Amartey to then move back to his more natural position as that hold midfielder, meaning Soumare drops out. We have heard as well that James Justin had surgery on Thursday night after rupturing his Achilles. That effectively ended all hope of featuring in Qatar for England. So we have Luke Thomas there at left back. The other option could possibly be maybe Mark Albrighton, but I've went for Thomas for now.
So we switch our attention from Leicester to Liverpool, and any kind of pressing news there that will affect the team at all?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty much happy with how we've set up here. Again, we're looking at maybe the Henderson, Fabinho debate and who, starts in that holding role. Everybody else within that team, I think more or less picks itself. I'm fairly confident. So, like I say, it's just the Fabinho and Henderson. It may be the Brazilian that I do opt for, but like I say, Henderson's there for now.
And Nunez is one of your differential Dinnery picks for this week, isn't it?
Yeah, I've actually brought him in. I already own Salah, and I have brought Nunez as a 1 week punt. That was on the back of Calvert-Lewin's injury, so I took a little bit of a punt on him a few weeks back. That didn't pay off, but that's always the case sometimes when you go for these differential choices. Let's hopefully sort of Nunez does the business. The only slight concern that I have, Obviously, Liverpool facing Southampton, who have Nathan Jones in charge for his first game. So I'm hoping that that new manager bounce comes after Christmas and not this weekend.
Yeah. Well, I think as well that the thing is the aerial inability of Southampton won't be kind of fixed by a managerial appointment. I think that they just don't have that within their squad. There's a lot of young players as well. I don't think they've got that physicality in them, and I think Nunes will run riot. It's going to be a good one for the not for the Saints, but for Liverpool against the Saints. Manchester City. What is the latest on Haaland? I think this is the big one that people are really, really interested in.
Yeah, of course, he wasn't involved or certainly rested midweek. In terms of his injury, he's not perfect. He's not 100%. Pep Guardiola has been fairly vocal with regards to that, but he seems to churn out, in recent times, he's getting a lot better. And when prompted and asked for, anything definitive in terms of an update, he throws back, well, we have another session. We'll see how he is, but he's getting better. And City have another session on Friday afternoon. Now, for me, like I say, again, this team's not locked in. I haven't included Alvarez. That's maybe doing him a little bit of an injustice because he scored 3 in his last 3 appearances. And maybe, I maybe look to switch Haaland out. There's part of us that just cannot bench Haaland, just given the player that he is. And I always, I'm always looking for that silver lining on the cloud and thinking, it's best to maybe start with Haaland, get the game won, and then take him off and replace him. I am actually toying with maybe starting Haaland and Alvarez together. But then obviously that means who do we lose within that City lineup? So that's always going to be the issue when you've got so much strength in depth within that team.
Well, this is a point that loads of people have now commented on with the strength and depth. We've got a couple of questions. Bernardo, Foden, John Trey has said, come on, Ben, please tell me Haaland and Foden will really start. Eugenio has said, I thought it would be Mahrez. And then John Trey has said, you never know with Pep. And I think that's the thing, is it's a very hard one. Last weekend we were discussing it. We thought Foden would be back in the 11 and he plays 23 minutes. It was so irritating. Something that we've discussed quite often through the season is if you want to avoid the midfield heartache of the Pep roulette reel, get De Bruyne. He's bloody amazing. He's fantastic. And there's no real risk of rotation. But yeah.
This is definitely one where I do tweak the City lineup right in the way up until that FPL deadline. I think it was even, 10 or 15 minutes before last weekend when I brought Alvarez in. So, like I say, if you're worried or concerned or just want to have one final check on where it is, like I say, this will be one that I will be looking to update probably nearer the time. Somebody
said, Ben, are you a double agent? Because the last weekend we didn't get it right. Are you a double agent for Pep?
I'm not a double agent, but like I say, I did actually get that right. I think I got 10 out of the 11. I think the only player that I had in, I certainly got the Alvarez and I had the Gundogan. So they weren't in that initial lineup that we streamed live. So those were tweaks that we made later on. I'm not a double agent. If I have the information to hand, it will be delivered. So rest assured.
Turn our attention to the other side of Manchester, the red side. Interesting starting at 11 there. No Ronaldo, but Martial back in there. And also Garnacho. I think he's played really, really well recently. If he does get that start, he's really deserving of it. But yeah, talk us through your thinking in this side.
Yeah, Cristiano Ronaldo missed out against Aston Villa due to illness. Nothing too serious. So he has a possibility of returning to the squad. Anthony Martial, of course, scored against Aston Villa. He's returning off the back of that hamstring issue and that lower back problem. I think he's probably just about there in terms of being ready for a start. Garnacho, well, that comes about because of Jadon Sancho, who hasn't been in and around the squad. Again, it's been referenced as an illness, but I think that's ruled him out of the last three. And also Anthony, that's a hip flexor problem. That's kept him out. Again, nothing too serious. He has been included in that Brazilian World Cup squad, so it's not serious or long term. The other starting place that's maybe up for debate comes at right back. That's because Diego Dalot has been is suspended. That's 5 yellow cards, rules him out of that one. And I did get a question actually, and this is one that I'll just throw in there. Why was Dalot allowed to play in that Carabao Cup and suspended for this, while players who got a straight red last weekend were suspended? And the reason that rule was brought in is because what happened was when players were on the brink of that suspension limit for cautionable offences, what you had players who were deliberately going for a yellow card to get cautioned, so they would actually serve their ban in a domestic cup competition and then return and be available for the Premier League. So the league altered slightly their rules with regards to that. So that's why Dalot was able to play against Aston Villa, but is ruled out of this one. And I've went for Harry Maguire alongside Martinez, with Lindelof at right back, just to deputise in this one-off game.
So we got a couple of questions. Just Martial as a punt. Do you guarantee a start, Ben?
I very rarely guarantee any starts, but if you just look at who Erik ten Hag has available at his minute, then everything points towards that Martial start. Is he 100% ready in terms of his match fitness and sharpness? And do I think he'll get 90 minutes? I would have to say no with regards to that. But I certainly think he's ready in enough of a position to maybe get 55 to 65 minutes under his belt. Of course, it will depend on how the game's going as to how maybe Erik ten Hag wants to manage his squad and manage those players in and around that game.
Your boys, Newcastle. Wilson up top, is he starting? We saw him come off 45th minute last week. That was due to illness. What can you tell us about the Newcastle team? Is it pretty much unchanged?
This is unchanged from last weekend. Again, you go down to St Mary's and you can say whatever you want about Southampton. You've still got to go and beat that team in front of you and do a job. And I think 4-1 was a great result. What are we talking about in terms of this squad? Well, we have Joe Linton back after his suspension. That potentially puts Jacob Murphy's place under threat. But then again, if Callum Wilson isn't quite 100%, now I do think he will be included in the matchday squad regardless. It's whether Eddie Howe feels that he's ready to start or not. I cannot bench Callum Wilson. I just really... Whether it's the black and white side of me thinking that, if Callum Wilson is anywhere near fit, he starts, particularly when you haven't got a natural goal scorer to come in with Alexander Isak currently suspended. Alan Saint-Maxim has played centrally before. Joe Linton has played centrally, but none of them have got that, that instinct, that goal scoring threat. And for me, like I say, Callum Wilson has been training away from the main group, but he has been training quite well. So he should be back with the boys today, and fingers crossed he's fine for that early evening kickoff against Chelsea. I'm hoping to have maybe a little bit of news sometime later, but whether it's a definitive answer or not, who can say?
With Wilson as well, is there that kind of risk reward situation that he'll be thinking, I want to play that last game before the World Cup. I want those minutes in my legs. I want to score a few goals and hit the World Cup on a high, and maybe force, Gareth Southgate into considering him a bit more.
Look, I think the reality of the situation, and I've actually spoke to Callum about this, and he's, we're under no illusions here. Harry Kane is the starter in the World Cup England squad without any shadow of a doubt. what Callum Wilson will be to do is he'll be wanting to make an impact as and when he's called upon, and in whatever case that may be, in whichever game that may be, regardless of what happens in the Carabao Cup or these final fixtures. That will not sway Gareth Southgate in any way, shape or form. He's not really the type of guy that will make those off-the-cuff quick decisions. He's methodical, they make the plans, and he's been working with these players for a long, long time. So he knows their strengths. He knows what they bring to the team. He knows their characters inside out. And like I say, just for Callum Wilson to be involved with that will be a great experience. And it's excellent for Newcastle.
Let's turn our attention to Nottingham Forest then. Any quick news on that?
I have included Jess Lingard in this Forest lineup, and that was based purely, again, on that Carabao Cup fixture. Steve Cooper will want to try and carry a little bit of momentum through onto this break. And of course, Lingard, who's been very disappointing up until now, gets himself a goal and an assist against Tottenham. So that was a good result for them. We're hoping to build on it. So the majority of that squad, question marks over Kouyaté, his fitness, that'll be the main talking point. Maybe O'Brien could come in if he does fail a late test.
Southampton, as you said, their new manager, new kind of setup, I guess. Any big changes to the team, or is this one real guesswork?
Yeah, look, you're really struggling because one, you have a new manager who's coming in with no real sort of understanding on how he's going to implement his own philosophies, and indeed whether he's had enough time to do that, or whether he's going to be focusing on information that he's getting from those people who are already there. Now, just a quick look at how Luton have been set up previously. For the most part, they went with a back three, and that certainly is possible with Southampton. I think we did see that maybe against Crystal Palace just a few weeks back. They didn't get the result that they wanted, but it does show that they do have the personnel to be able to implement that type of game plan. And with the loss of maybe Walker Peters at right back and Larios, maybe that three at the back is more of a realistic option. But like I say, it is pretty much guesswork with the manager coming in for the first time.
We've got a question from GV. He said, I've got Wilson, Haaland and Mitrovic. I have a bad feeling none of them are going to start.
I mean, that I would say that's unfortunate in the first instance. Look, Mitrovic, I think you can forget about Mitrovic. There is no chance, at least with the other two. In terms of where I would rate them, I would give Wilson the best chance, and then Haaland, not necessarily just because of his fitness worries, but also because of the way Alvarez has been performing. That would be my only worry. But like I say, I think I could see Pep maybe going with two up top and a slight tweak of formation. But that again, that's just my opinion.
Right, let's turn our attention then to Tottenham. Good news there in the squad. Kulusevski is back in. The ever-changing, unknowing kind of wing-back situation there as well. Any confidence on those picks?
Confidence. I'm always confident with my picks. The reality of the situation is I'm probably a little bit overconfident on occasions. This is a difficult call. Dejan Kulusevski and also Richarlison, both of those returning from hamstring and calf injuries respectively. They got around about 30 minutes in the Carabao Cup midweek. Antonio Conte will decide on whether he believes one or both are maybe ready for a start. If he thinks that'll be the case, then it could be Basuma that drops out and we may see a more familiar looking 3-4-3 setup. One or two questions with regards to the fitness of Harry Kane I've had over the last couple of days. He came off again around about that hour mark midweek. That was purely fatigue related. Now, we've heard Antonio Conte talk about this congested fixture schedule, the demands that have been placed on his players, the load, and then he comes out and he only makes 3 changes against Nottingham Forest. He has an ideal opportunity to rest some of those key players, and he still rejects that. And ultimately, it backfired because Tottenham didn't perform and they went out the Carabao Cup, like I say, despite naming a really strong starting 11.
Yeah, I think there's all sorts of problems at Tottenham, if I'm honest. they're a bit of an avoid apart from a Harry Kane. You know, he's Mr. Consistent. He looks great. He seems to be the shining star, and he's the only one kind of making sure that they're getting all right results at the moment. But we'll see what happens with him. We've got quite a few questions on Tottenham. Jondro says, can you give me the lottery numbers, which wing-backs will start? So I think we've kind of discussed that. FPL Animate has asked, is there any chance that Doherty starts for Spurs?
Well, his chances have certainly increased following an injury to Ryan Sessegnon. So he is out of the game. He picked up a problem in the Carabao Cup. And if you were to ask me who I believe Conte should start on a regular basis, it would definitely be Doherty. Earlier on in the campaign, it was more, the issue tend to be that carryover from that knee injury that ended his season last year and a building up of fitness. He hasn't recaptured that form, that pre-injury form, and that's maybe why Emerson Royal has been sort of trusted with that space. But like I say, in the absence of Sessegnon, that means that Perisic is probably locked in on that left-hand side. So, look, it's possible, but I'm thinking probably not, given the team that he went with in the Carabao Cup.
We've also got Kulusevski as a striker, Ben. Will he play the whole game?
I would think it's highly unlikely that he's going to play 90 minutes. We're talking about a player who, coming off the back of limited minutes since the international break, we've already had one setback in terms of that injury to the hamstring. So while I think he has a really good chance to start, he's probably only got around about 60 or 70 minutes, ideally, in those legs of him. You don't want to try and, push or risk things too much. And like I say, in those latter stages of the game, fatigue is a worry and a concern. And, you're putting a lot of stress through those hamstrings. So I think he will be managed. And I think it'll probably be somewhere in and around that 60, 65, 70-minute mark.
And Sam Smith has pointed out, Richarlison, is he likely to have any involvement in the game?
Absolutely. Whether that's from the start or, introduced from the bench. Like I say, the consideration they have is if he comes through today's session really well, and he had 30 minutes midweek there in the Carabao Cup, then I could see Antonio Conte, dropping East Basuma and going with a 3-4-3. And that would be Richarlison, Kulusevski, and also Harry Kane as the front three.
So we're moving into the final couple of teams. West Ham, first of all, they're kind of on intermittent form, but maybe a clean sheet for this weekend. But any team news for the 11 of the Hammers?
Yeah, none of the big hitters, to be honest. Maxwell Cornet won't be back until after Christmas. The only other issue, which was picked up midweek, was to Emerson. That's a broken nose, so he's had that reset. It looks like he's going to miss out, but obviously Aaron Cresswell is that first choice on the left-hand side. Elsewhere within that team, Skamaka hasn't been in great form of late. Antonio did score midweek, so maybe he's pushing and vying for a start, but I'll stick with this one as it is. We're due to hear from David Moyes. He was massively overrunning from his training session this morning, so if there's any sort of late news with regards to that, then possibly I could update this Hammers lineup.
And the final team is Wolves. So any information on them?
Yeah, Steve Davis, his final game in charge. He will be looking to, finish on a high, having beaten Leeds as well in the Carabao Cup 1-0. Right back slot, Johnny picked up a hamstring issue. Semedo was one of those ones that served a ban in the Carabao Cup, so he can slot straight in there. Nunez has been past fit after that shoulder issue, but I'm struggling to squeeze him into that starting lineup. Again, we're not included Adama Traore in there. He could quite easily come in on that right-hand side. Diego Costa's still out, which means Hee-chan should have an opportunity to try and stake a claim long-term in that position. If he doesn't, Daniel Pedence is one that could maybe move more centrally, with Guedes moving to the left and Traore coming in on the right. So again, there's a little bit of fluidity within this Wolves lineup, and this is one that I could potentially tweak as well.
John Dre has asked, no Johnson or Kufal. Are those injuries?
Johnson or Ben Johnson. That's it. No. So this is pretty much how I see their strongest back four as it currently stands. The only player that could potentially disrupt this for the Hammers would be Naif Agard. He started in the cup. He has played in Europe, but he's maybe just not ready to play 100% in the Premier League. But this is how David Moyes has been going in recent times, and I don't really see either of those players coming in to that back four when these are fully fit.
John Dre has also asked your thoughts on Foden as a false nine if Haaland and Alvarez are benched.
If Haaland was benched or continues to stay on the bench, then Alvarez starts. I don't see a world where Alvarez doesn't start if Haaland doesn't either. Like I see, he's coming off the back of 3 goals in his last 3 appearances, so he's earned that right to start in that Pep's team. And, you know, if Haaland impresses in training today, that's why I feel he could maybe, you know, tweak that formation and maybe go with 2. But like I say, he'd be very disappointed for Alvarez given the form that he's been in since he's come into that City lineup.
Final question from Sam, possibly the most important. I can't believe we've not covered this so far yet. It's a bit of a letdown from us. Will England win the World Cup?
No, absolutely not.
Very positive there from Ben. I also share those sentiments. I think injuries, but also the tactics. I don't know, not very inspiring, is it, from Gareth Southgate?
Just the team. I'm not necessarily on about tactics or injuries. They're just not good enough. End of story.
Fair enough. Who do you think will win?
I'm looking at Brazil at this moment in time. I think it definitely will favour the conditions. Maybe one of those South American sides. You look at the amount of attacking talent that the Brazilians have, and wow, that could be one of the strongest we've ever seen. So they're going to be hard to ignore. I still wouldn't completely rule out Argentina, although, you know, I don't by any stretch of the imagination think they're one of the strongest teams. But when you've got the likes of Lionel Messi in your squad, you know, then there's always hope.
And yeah, that is it for today. I hope everybody enjoyed the answers there. Hope England fans aren't too upset with Ben's answer there and the fact that I back it up. You know, it's I don't think football's coming home, and frankly, I'm not looking forward to the World Cup. But that is a discussion for another day, and yeah, I've got very strong thoughts on that issue, but I don't want to bring down Game Week 16, so we will discuss that maybe at another time. But for now, I'm going to wish everybody the best of luck, the best of health. We look forward to seeing you through the month ahead, so stay subscribed. We will be doing content and things for you, and yeah, just have a good Game Week 16 before the World Cup break. But for now, a goodbye from both of us, Ben?
Yeah, have a great break. Enjoy it. Come back fully refreshed. But like Ian said, keep your eyes open. There'll be lots of new content dropping, and we will be continuing